Hello, welcome to Series 2 of the Railway Dogcast. I didn't think we'd make it this far, but here we are. Tony from HS Rail joined us, and
Hello.
We're delighted that Richard Bowker CBE has joined us today as well. Thanks, Richard, for taking some time out to talk to us. One thing, obviously you've had an illustrious career, but you're probably most well known for green signals now, I would imagine.
Now, yeah, in the railway world, I guess that's probably true, yes.
Yeah. And I'm always impressed when I watch or listen to it about the amount of research that you do for each episode. We do no research whatsoever.
Excellent.
But I was interested on your LinkedIn profile that you said you divided your career into 3 stages.
Yes.
So you went to Leicester University and did economics.
Yeah, economics and social history.
Yeah.
So, and it was a joint degree, and I'm glad I did it because my professor of economic history, was my tutor in my second and third years, was a chap called Derek Allcroft, who's one of the most, I suppose, most well-written commentators on the economics of British Railways in the sort of the 60s and that.
Yeah.
So those discussions are very interesting, as you can imagine.
So did you have an interest in railways before you got into transportation? I know your father worked for a bus company, I think, wasn't it?
Yes, he did. Yeah. So my father's absolutely a bus industry lifer.
Yeah.
And but he also had a love of trains. I think if you love one, you love the other, you know. Public transport, and so as a young boy was always we were always off to something that involved railways or buses, and so I was, I suppose, indoctrinated at a very early age.
Yeah. So was young Richard on the end of a platform, or?
Oh, young Richard absolutely was. No, I'm not ashamed to admit it.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't imagine it in this world. I mean, I would never have let my children do anything like this, but I had my first runabout ticket, as they were called, those, Area 2, which covered the area we lived in Chorley at the time in Lancashire. And so it came down as far as Chorley, I think it went as far as Bolton, and then Preston all the way up to Carlisle. In fact, it actually went to Dumfries, would you believe, or Lockerbie. Yes. All of the Cumbrian coast, all of the settled Carlisle line. And I had the first one of those when I was 11.
Wow.
You know, and I'd go out for the day. Yeah. The only rule was I had to be back by 6 or 6:30, but I would get up at absolutely the crack of dawn, pack make my sandwiches in the bag, with the coffee thermos, and I was gone, with my big British Rail national timetable. And that was me for the day. And you'd come home and my mother would say, "Oh, where have you been today, Lo?" And I said, "Oh, I've been up to Carlisle a couple of times." "Oh, that's lovely, dear. What would you like for your tea?" I mean, can you imagine letting let our kids do that now? So no, from the very early age, I was either on the end of Preston station platform, Manchester Victoria, that was a big day out, or on one of those runabout tickets.
Yeah. So what led you into economics?
A complete accident, really. I'd always wanted to be an engineer when I was at school. I'd done double maths physics A-levels very badly, and in fact to the point where I actually changed course part of the way through my A-levels and then took economics because I'd actually enjoyed it. We'd done it as an extra O-level in the lower 6th, and I thought, oh, this is a really interesting subject. And it was a fascinating time as well because it was 84, 85 was when the miners' strike was on. It was huge changes in British economic society, really. We'd gone from a very command and control to a very almost laissez-faire approach to economics. I found all that fascinating. And so when the time came to go to university, I absolutely didn't have the grades to do engineering. And I was actually really glad. I'd decided that's not what I wanted to do. Yeah. And I applied through clearing, which is a great system, even now. And Leicester were prepared to take me, and so I went, yep, that'll do. So it was a bit of an accident, but a very happy one.
Yeah, and from there you went to join London Transport?
Via a very strange intermediate stage, because what I really wanted to be was a musician. And I'd learned piano as a kid. I'd sort of learned, done grades and stuff. And I really wanted to be a musician. Well, actually, what my real dream was to play on a record in a recording studio and actually play, a massive concert. That's what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And so when I actually left university, I spent some time getting to know people and built up some good networks. And for a little while after university, I was a session musician. And I got to do those two things that I wanted to do.
You are on an LP somewhere.
I am on quite a few, yeah.
Who are your musical influences?
I think when you're a session musician, you tend to sort of get required to play lots of different things. I mean, personally for me, I'm a very strange. I love classical music. I love all forms of classical music. I love choral music, and I love prog rock. I'm a massive prog rock fan. And so, when I was a kid, I learned all of Tony Banks' solos, from Genesis. He still is my keyboarding hero. And so I got to do lots and lots of different kinds of things. But it's a tough life. It's a lonely life. I was on the road a lot, in recording studios a lot. And after a while, I decided that it isn't actually what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And my father worked for London Transport at the time. He worked for London Buses. Yeah. And he said, they've got some very good graduate schemes at LT as it was then. And I thought, well, I'm not going to the buses because that's where you are. Well, no, we got on extremely well. But I just thought that just kind of feels a bit weird, really. Yeah. But the Underground had some fantastic graduate finance scheme. I never even thought about being a finance person. But I applied and got on. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Yeah. So how did you get employed by Virgin?
Through a number of, again, another one of those complete, I've never had a career plan. Right. I mean, it's probably obvious actually, right?
I don't know what I want to do when I grow up.
No, well, I'm still trying to work it out myself, really. I am 60 this month and I'm still not sure.
Big happy birthday.
Thank you very much. It's not yet, it's just a couple of weeks away. I was very lucky at the Underground. I started as a finance person. Actually didn't really like finance. And realised I never wanted to be an accountant, that's for sure. But the Underground were wonderful. They paid for us to go, the graduates, we were paid on day release. They paid for all our exams, all our tuition, all our books. It was extraordinary, really. And so I felt, and I still do feel an enormous sense of gratitude and loyalty to London Underground, because without them I wouldn't have had the career I've had. But I was really lucky. In 1992, the then Conservative government, I think Ken Clarke was the Chancellor, launched a thing called the Private Finance Initiative. And I know that generates lots of, sort of reaction amongst people. But for me, it was brilliant because the government said, right, okay, if you can come up with a way of doing financing things off balance sheet without using public money, you might be able to do it. And the Underground said, our Underground leadership said, well, we need to replace the Northern Line trains. Why don't we give that a go? And I just got put on the team initially of 2, and it grew to be quite a big project team, to see if we could lease Northern Line trains as opposed to buy them. Never been done before. This is before Ross goes around. And we did. We just kept going. And I remember the managing director of the Underground at the time, Dennis Tiddlycliffe, said, keep going until the Treasury tells us to stop. So we did, and they never did in the end. And we leased those trains. So when BR privatisation came along and people wanted to do the same thing, but on the big railway, the biggest one of all was Virgin. Yeah. They needed to brand new fleet for the West Coast Main Line, brand new fleet for cross country. And there were actually very, very few of us, probably about half a dozen, in the country who'd bought trains and arranged off-balance sheet financing. So literally, the company I was by then working for, we dropped a line to Virgin and said, we can come and help. And they went, okay. Yeah. And I mean, not a lot more complicated than that. And I found myself there initially as a contractor, but then I ended up, once we'd done the deal, the Pendolino and the Voyager deal, I then I was invited to join the board, and then I ended up joining Virgin. So it kind of snowballed from that, but the Virgin thing all came out of that Northern Line deal.
Were you ever tempted to ask Richard Branson for a record deal?
No. No, but I did get to know Richard very well because I became group commercial director of the Virgin Group, and spent an awful lot of time with Richard, including chatting from time to time about the record
Yeah.
business, which we had then, which was called V2 Records. And no, I was never tempted to ask for it. I'm absolutely a behind-the-scenes session person, never up front.
Not running the camera.
No.
So you introduced the Pendolinos, I think.
Yeah.
Did you say the Voyagers?
The Voyagers.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of those we talk about a lot. The other one we talk about a bit less.
Right.
I actually really like the Voyagers. I mean, I know that'll probably have people going, "Ooh," you know, but actually, there were so many constraints at the time. We could only buy what, you know, the things we were constrained from doing, particularly because Railtrack, as it was then, didn't really understand its own infrastructure. They didn't know how big it was. I know that sounds a really daft thing to say, but when we asked them, you know, we're buying these tilting trains, and of course, the tilting train is a very different thing. It's tilting, obviously. So as it tilts, it takes up more space. So therefore, you know it's going to have to be a bit tapered in up at the cant rail. So we say, well, how big is your infrastructure? So we know how big we can build the body shell so that they can tilt and still be within gauge. Well, we're not sure. What do you mean you're not sure? Well, a Mark III is okay. How do you know? Well, it doesn't hit anything. And I'm not joking. These were the conversations. And we pushed and pushed. And I'll never forget, sat in the project team at Virgin Trains one day, this box arrived. It was a huge box. It was probably like that old tea, you remember the old tea chest you used to get when you moved house when you were a kid? It was that sort of size. And in the box, we opened it up, were literally, must have been about 100 VHS tapes. And what they'd done is they'd got somebody to sit in the cab of a train and basically film out the cab window all of the West Coast Main Line. They said, there you go, that's the infrastructure. And we said, no. We were thinking CAD drawings or digital maps, whatever. Yeah. And so it was all a bit basic. So I'm afraid in the end, I suspect the Pendolinos and the Voyagers are a little bit more constrained in terms of space than they otherwise would have been, because, you know, they understandably, the manufacturers had to play safe a bit.
Better be safe than sorry, yeah.
Well, the manufacturers were on the hook for having a train that could get accepted.
Yeah.
Virgin wasn't really in a position to take that risk. I mean, you know, there's a commercial principle that the risk should always sit with the party best able to manage it. Well, that was actually clearly Railtrack, but they didn't know, so we had to make some assumptions.
Was the tilting technology new, or did it derive from the AP2 project? Or?
Well, yeah, a bit of both actually. So tilting technology, I mean, British Rail Research did some phenomenal research on, and well, more than research. I mean, obviously with the APT, it actually went into production with the was it a class 370 or 373? I can never remember. No, 370. 370, I think, the APT. That was a different tilting technology to the one we use. So that was a hydraulic tilting system. So if you think about the muscles in your arm, your muscles, they can pull, but they can't push. You need a second muscle to pull it the other way. It's exactly the same with the hydraulic tilting system. So APT had two actuators, one to pull it one way, one to pull it another. The Pendolino is sort of a next generation, if you like. It has a single actuator. It's a linear induction motor that literally has a screw and it can go both ways. Which is very reliable, very powerful, takes up a bit less space, etc. So the Pendolino is sort of the next generation along, and some may say, you know, more than one generation, I don't know. But where we were very lucky was that the team that advised us technically on the Pendolino procurement were part of the team that had worked at British Rail Research. So there's an extraordinary lady called Bridget Eickhoff who has probably forgotten more about tilting train technology than I'll ever know. And, you know, Bridget was part of the team that helped us. So there is very much there's sort of almost like a thread all the way through from the APT into the Pendolino. And it's a lot to do with the people that were involved as well, which I thought was really nice. And we did quite a few of the technical discussions in the former BR Railway Technical Centre, you know, the research office at Derby, which, you know, so there's some lovely links there.
I didn't realise that. That's great. So you offered the job at the Strategic Rail Authority? Oh,
I was absolutely headhunted to join the strategic rail authority by the government. I mean, it was remarkable, really. I thought I'd said so many rude things about them that there was no way that they would ever, actually take me on, but they did.
Yeah.
And as a result, I accepted the role. I mean, it was one of those odd things. I didn't think I was actually going to be doing it. I even the day that I said yes, I thought, is this actually really happening? Because I wasn't sure. I mean, working for the government is not for everybody. Not everybody's cup of tea, really. But I had a kind of a daft idea that I could make a bit of a difference, and so I said, yeah.
So,
Richard wasn't very happy, I have to say. Yeah, Richard Branson was not very happy at the time.
So what was your role as the head of that organisation?
So the Strategic Rail Authority was set up under the 2000 Act, Transport Act, and it was to provide overall leadership for the industry. That was what it was there to do. And it was to set strategies, and it was to award the franchises, and it was to create the overall industry strategic plan. The challenge was that the way that the 93 Act, core elements of which were still in the 2000 Act, which was the original Railways Act, created an independent economic regulator. And so the notion that Railtrack was the infrastructure owner and operator, and in theory anybody could get access onto the network. So in order for there to be no conflict of interest, I couldn't tell Railtrack what I wanted them to do. That was done ultimately by they were a private company, and they were regulated. So there was always, I suppose, an element of friction between the SRA and the ORR, the regulator. I mean, actually, Tom Winder and I, he was the rail regulator and I was at the SRA, personally we got on fine. I mean, we had our moments, and certainly towards the end we had some significant disagreements, really, about policy and direction on certain things. But we still keep in touch, and we still, we're still on very good terms. But it didn't really help. It didn't really help the whole, I suppose, just the working relationship. Really, it was a complex structure, and I think too many people thought they were in charge on certain things. But despite all that, we did get some stuff done, stuff I'm very proud of, really. But it was at times a challenging environment.
Can you name one item that you were proud of?
Yeah, well, I think I'd probably name two, because one's very high profile, one is perhaps less well understood, but just as important. Probably the most high profile one was the West Coast route modernisation, which when I joined the SRA, I mean, I had some knowledge of it from Virgin, obviously, but when I joined the SRA, it was a £13 billion project, out of control, no clear plan. Railtrack did not know what they were doing. They were spinning like crazy, and the government, certainly at official level, even if not at ministerial level, were quite, I mean, there was some serious talk, let's just can the whole thing. And I thought, actually, I'm going to try and see if I can fix this, and see that and sort this out. The hubris of relative youth, really. But I thought it was really important. And along the way, there were some serious challenges, people trying to actually stop us doing that at times. But, we got the project under control. We got a strategy in place, which we consulted on. We got everybody bought into it. We got the price down, probably closer to sort of 10 billion. A bit of a debate about what the final number was, but we certainly took some money out of it. And we ended up with things today, which I think we all take for granted, forward tracking of the Trent Valley, grade separated flyover at Nuneaton, the whole of the Rugby station remodelling. I mean, those three things alone were massive enhancement elements, and without that, the West Coast would not function as it does today, and it would not have enabled the operators to grow their businesses the way they did, or freight to operate the way it does. So that I'm very proud of, because it looked like the impossible project at the time, because everybody kind of hated it. Well, it doesn't hate each other, but I thought it's literally nobody's going to agree with each other here, but they did in the end. The other one was a remarkable project, really, which I had very little knowledge of, because it was just nothing that Virgin had ever got anywhere near. the SRA, my predecessor, had awarded 3 20-year franchises to South West Trains, as it was then, South Eastern and South Central, which involved the total replacement of all the slam door rolling stock. And the HMRI or HMRC had mandated a day when all those trains, the slam door stock, had to go.
Yeah.
Which was perfect, except nobody had checked with Railtrack first whether there was enough power for all these trains. And if you think about these slam door trains, they don't actually consume, DC motors. They haven't got any air conditioning. There's no air operate. There's no slide powered doors or anything like that. But of course, all these brand new trains, a lot more power, and there wasn't enough. It was better the further over you went to Kent. I don't know whether that was anything to do with Eurostar upgrades, but certainly by the time you got over to sort of Hampshire, and it was pretty grim. And I had to go to the Treasury, get the thick end of another $1 billion on top of the spending review commitments, and we together cliented it. Railtrack delivered it very well, it has to be said. And the one stat I remember is that the amount of wiring, cabling, because I remember seeing it all at the MOD depot at Ludgershall when we went to go and do a press conference there, would have been enough to have rewired the whole of Portsmouth. Like literally everything, every building. Yeah. It was a lot of cable.
A lot of it was new substations as well along the line.
New substations, new lots of things.
Yeah.
And it got done. And it got done just about. So I think we got a slight extension on the Mark 1s, but it was touch and go. And I remember that one. I remember thinking, flipping heck, So and nobody kind of talks about that one quite as much as the West Coast, but that was that was arguably a even more of a touch and go thing, actually.
Yeah, because I guess if you hadn't secured that additional funding, there wouldn't have been any trains running, or very few trains. I guess. Yeah.
No, what would have happened? I don't know. Would the rail inspector have had to have kind of gone back and come up with it? But it's very political, that whole slam door thing.
Was the slam door thing because of the Clapham disaster?
I think it was just, I believe, I certainly think that was kind of part of it, but that was in the 80s, wasn't it? So there was quite a lot that then followed that.
There's more crashes, weren't there?
And there were more incidents, yeah. And look, they served well. They were wonderful trains.
Yeah.
But actually, there's some things you could do with override protection. But the truth is that people fell out of those trains, out of those slam doors. I know people get very excited about it now, and you just say, it's just common sense. It isn't common sense, frankly. I think we've got a duty to keep improving safety, and those slam door trains had reached the end of the line, literally. So I think the bigger problem would have been, there would have just been all these brand new trains, because the trains were coming. The new ones were coming, whatever. So, and can you imagine the scenes of literally acres and acres of new trains not going anywhere?
Sounds familiar.
Politically. Well, it does, but I think it would have been worse purely because of the volume of them, So anyway, it got done. Very happy about that.
Yeah. And then from there, you went to National Express Group as the chief executive?
I did. I had a brief time at a thing called Partnerships for Schools for the Department of Education, which was interesting, but I didn't enjoy it really. I don't think I was suited for that world. It was all a little bit complicated, to be honest. I think we overcomplicated stuff. I think we do tend to overcomplicate stuff in this country. But anyway, I went from there to National Express, and had a great time there. That was a big business. There's a lot of people.
So that was looking after the rail side and the bus side of things?
Well, there were a number of divisions. So there was the rail franchises. There was a big bus division, which included, I think, still then, Europe's largest single bus company, which is Travel West Midlands, West Midlands. But quite a few other bus operations had some franchise concessions in London. Then there was the coach business. That was just the UK. We then had a very large North American school bus business, the yellow school buses. So that was very big. I think we had.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, very big. Not now, but then they did. And then another company in Spain, big division in Spain called ALSA, which was like I would consider it the Spanish version of National Express coaches. So the business, I mean, it was at one point we had about 42,000 people in National
Wow.
Express Group PLC, and so I spent an awful lot of time in Madrid Airport and going over to Toronto and Chicago. I can tell you, yeah.
You got your air miles in.
I got my air miles in at that time, yeah.
Was your main competitor Stagecoach?
No, it's a group, all the big groups, so Stagecoach, Go Ahead Group, First Group, and then there's some smaller ones perhaps that have maybe even come to the fore now of late. But they all the big bus transport businesses that grew out of deregulation, all large organisations with good big operations.
Yeah.
So everybody kind of got on, but until it came to bidding for things, and then we didn't.
Yeah, and then you decided to get some sun after that.
I did. National Express. It was a challenging time. We'd won the East Coast franchise, and was very happy about that. And everybody still says to this day, "Oh, we massively overbid for it." I don't believe we did overbid for it. We didn't actually. The Department of Transport told me at the time we hadn't actually bid the most amount of money. But what nobody saw coming, and I defy anybody to say, no, they saw this coming, was the global financial crisis of 2008. And it was a real issue because for companies that had debt, bearing in mind up to that point, we'd all been told, debt is good. You don't come asking the shareholders for any more equity. Go and get some leverage up your balance sheet. And we weren't madly leveraged, but we had borrowed money in order to buy another Spanish coach business called Continental Auto, which really gave us the Spanish coach market. And then literally, no time after the Continental Auto deal had gone through, Lehman Brothers, and it was just carnage in the debt markets. So we like a number of other FTSE 250 companies found ourselves with some real challenges in terms of refinancing debt in a market that just wasn't interested. I mean, literally overnight it went like that. So it was difficult, and I was desperately unhappy about it, because had that not happened, East Coast was, in my view, absolutely fine, and we'd have run it through the franchise, and it would have been great. It was the financial crisis that killed it, not the bid. I mean, nobody kind of wants to hear that, and nobody really believes you, but I absolutely am 100% convinced it was the financial crisis, not the bid. But nonetheless, I mean, the outcome was what it was, and it was always going to be very difficult. And and at the same time, I did then get the opportunity to go to the Middle East to go and get some sun, as you say. And there's a little bit of me I was very much in two minds, because I don't like leaving things unresolved. But National Express probably did need a different person to me anyway at that time. So I went to the UAE, and had a fascinating time out in Abu Dhabi.
Was it easier to get things done there, or?
It was different.
Yeah.
It was different. It's not just a case of they click their fingers and stuff happens. They're very driven, but you still have committees. They're just different kinds of committees talking about different kinds of things, right? So, but they are the most wonderful people. I mean, I was very lucky. I had an interesting board. The project was actually pan-UAE. It wasn't just Abu Dhabi. So it was actually, the company was owned by the federal government partly, and then the government of Abu Dhabi. So there are 7 emirates. And so Abu Dhabi is one of the biggest physical emirate, and that they own the majority, but then all the other 6 had a stake as well. So it was quite political. And the chairman was from Abu Dhabi, and the vice chairman was from Dubai. And they were both very different people, but utterly brilliant in their own right. I mean, if I go back to Abu Dhabi now, I still go and see the gentleman who was the chairman. He was very senior. He was effectively a minister of economic development, a lovely, lovely man. And then the vice chairman, the deputy chairman, his day job. He was the chair of the Roads Transport Authority in Dubai, and he'd done the metro, and he was just a force of nature. Mataraltaya was his name, is his name, and he was just an absolute force of nature. And at the beginning, I thought, I'm never going to get on with this guy. And at the end, I just thought he was one of the best, best people I've ever worked with. So, yeah, so stuff got done, but it often got done in a very different way to how we would get things done. I learned very quickly that the shortest distance between 2 points in the UAE is never a straight line. You have to kind of wander around a bit, but it does get done in the end, and they are very focused. Yeah.
So you feel you achieved everything you needed to achieve?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the plan originally, they had this grand vision of what they called a GCC route with the Gulf Cooperation Council, which is the UAE, Oman, Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi, Kuwait, and so on. And they had this idea they wanted to build this pan-GCC railway. I was never 100% convinced that would happen, but I was fairly convinced that they would get done what they wanted to do in the UAE. And phase one was to build a railway down right into what they call the empty quarter, where there's an oil field. It's actually gas, and it's a sour gas field, and so when they extract the gas, sulfur comes out with it, right? Literally. And molten sulfur, can you imagine that, right? So they can either stick it in road tankers, which isn't very good, and you used to see that, bits of sort of sulfur dropping out the back of this tanker. Or the plan was to granulate it, turn it into granules at the plant, and then move it out by train. But you needed a train because these plants, when they were on stream, were producing 20,000 tons a day, right, of this stuff. So train, perfect. So that was the first job that we did, and yep, I got that all the way through from setting up the team, getting all the permissions, tendering all the contracts, placing the contracts, construction was underway. And now, when I go back, not only have they got that operating and have had it for a number of years, they've built most of the rest of it as well, which is fantastic to see. And the guy who was my commercial director at Etihad Rail at the time, just the most brilliant young man. You meet people, you go, you're going to be running it one day, and he is. Yeah. he's an Emirati, and his name is Shadi Malik, and I knew one day he would conquer the world, and now he's the CEO and doing a wonderful job. So I'm very, very happy with what we did in the UAE. Yeah.
Brilliant. And so you returned to the UK after that, and is the second phase of your career, was it sports governance?
Yeah. When we came back, because we probably would have stayed for longer. I mean, my daughter was born there. We were very happy in the UAE, but they'd had there'd been the Arab Spring, and then there was a bit of a financial crisis there as well. And the Emiratis very sensibly said, "Look, we're just going to pause stuff for a few years." I thought, well, I kind of need to be doing something. So, I left with on the most wonderful of terms, and probably could have done something else out there, but we decided no, we'll come back because the kids were getting to an age where we felt that was important from a school's point of view. So came back, but I had nearly gone when I was actually at National Express. I'd always wanted to get involved in football. I'm a massive football fan, and I wanted to get involved, and I nearly ended up running a very large football club, right? And I didn't for a whole variety of reasons. I'm very glad I didn't. I made the right decision at the time, but there's always that kind of, what if? Yeah, because we're a big club. And but I'd kept in because I'd also put my name forward to run the FA when I was leaving the Strategic Rail Authority, and I got down to the last 3 of that, and didn't get it. But learnt a lot through the process and got to know a couple of really interesting people, one of whom became a headhunter in his own right. And this guy rang me up. He'd obviously heard I was coming back, I'm not quite sure how. And he said, "Look, I know you're coming back. I'm just recruiting a new non-executive director for the Football League. Is that something you'd like to put in? It's not running a club, but is that something you'd like to put your name for?" And I went, "Yeah, sounds great, And I got the job, really hit it off with the other directors when I met them. And I did that for 6 years as the independent and then the senior independent, because we took another NED on, of the Football League, or the EFL as it now is. And boy, was that what a period. I mean, I learned. I thought railways could be knockabout. I mean, but football. Oh, it's brilliant. I mean, it's absolutely brilliant. I loved it. You know, I went through some extraordinary moments. You know, administrations. You know, of Leeds and Portsmouth and Port Vale, and then all the challenges at Coventry, getting them through, because there was a kind of culture of trying to save clubs and keep them going. So some really tricky things. We had big legal challenges over financial fair play from some of the clubs. We had, so there were some real challenges, but there's some, and then we had all the commercial contracts we had to renew with the TV rights, and I got involved with that. I chaired the audit committee as well, which was interesting. I honestly, amazing people, so passionate, absolutely loved it. Jeepers, there were days when I thought, it was crazy, but it was a fantastic experience.
Yeah, I often think rail enthusiasts are a bit like football fans.
Right.
They're obsessed with maybe a certain class of loco or a certain football club. I just think there's a connection there. I'm not a football fan myself, but
that's okay. That's fine.
Yeah. I can see the attraction for the game, and I really, because some people are so passionate about it.
It's a very tribal thing. I think once you've picked your club, that's kind of it, really. I mean, mine's Blackburn Rovers. I went to school in Blackburn, so it was kind of logical, really. Yeah. And then the notion that I could now be interested in any other club, I mean, I just can't get my head around that.
That's fun.
And Nigel, who's my co-presenter on Green Signals, who can't stand football, actually, but he's from Burnley.
Yeah.
And so there's two towns which are like 6 miles apart, and they might as well be in different universes when it comes to football. I mean, if you're from Blackburn, you're not interested in Burnley, and vice versa. It's amazingly tribal.
Yeah.
So,
It's like down here. It's like you got Southampton, Portsmouth, and you got Bournemouth. I say down here, so I meant down on the south coast.
I know where you mean. No, one of my very closest friends is a big Southampton fan, but he follows Bournemouth as well, just because he's actually a sports mad guy, actually, and he helped Bournemouth out when they, a number of years ago, and it looked as if it was a bit all over, really. So he's got a real affection. I think you can have a second club. That's okay.
Yeah, I mean, the real one for me is Arsenal. That's the one. That's the one that I've been to quite a few times.
Have you? You went to Highbury as well.
Highbury, yeah. I've never been to the Emirates though.
Have you not?
Can't get in. I've been past there, but never been.
It's a wonderful stadium. When it first opened, I thought, is it going to generate the atmosphere?
But,
I mean, I have been back since quite a few times and thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I fear it's not going to be. I just have a funny feeling how this year's going to go.
Yeah, it's
Sorry, this is a football moment.
It's kind of the typical. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen with them, I think. But sometimes you just get to a point when it's, as they say, the same old Arsenal, and so it's a little bit. I don't know.
Well, having watched Manchester City in the Carabao Cup, and then obviously the other day against Liverpool in the FA Cup, they've just got that look in their eyes. I don't know. We shall see. It'll be fascinating.
When I used to work, whenever I went to meetings and things, I always looked at the Premier League table.
Right.
Because after the meeting and people are in the bar with a few drinks, I found because I worked for BT, that the conversation always went to football. Yeah. So I used to try and memorise the table so I could ask some naive questions, fully knowing the answer, but felt that I could join into the conversation, even though I had no real interest in it whatsoever. So that's my secret.
That just means you're smart, But no, it can get a little bit obsessive. I completely agree, but the people are very commercial, and I had a lot of fun. I met some great people, some very impressive people, and some very passionate people. Yeah.
And from there, athletics.
Yeah, well, I did a number of sports governing jobs at the same time. So whilst I was on the board of the EFL, I was also briefly on the board of Super League, the rugby league, which was that's a slightly strange setup, actually. Ever such a slightly dysfunctional setup then, but I think there's a lot that's happened since. But I'm a northerner, so rugby league has always been something that's been of great interest. And then I was also at the same time briefly on the board of the London Marathon. I know you can probably tell, obviously I'm committed runner. No, seriously.
More so than me, I tell you.
Well, no, I loved running. I used to run a bit when I was a kid and then stopped when I went to university, and then rediscovered my love of it actually when we came back from the Middle East. And so was always fascinated by running. Joined the board of the London Marathon, which is the most incredible thing. I mean, just as a spectacle, as a charity fundraiser, it's just an extraordinary operation. And the opportunity to then go and run UK Athletics came up, or chair it, not had an excellent CEO. And I did that, and I'm glad I did. I really do. I'm very passionate about athletics. It didn't end very happily. I think there was. I did get a few things wrong in terms of relationships with some of the other affiliated organisations, but also I'm not sure they behaved terribly well either. And so in the end, quite a lot of the things that we did worked very well, but I was just thought, no, this is not where I'm going to add some real value here. So I moved on. I look back and think of all the things I've ever done, really, a little bit of sadness about that. And it sort of brought to the end, really, my sort of roles in sports governance, which I'm not unhappy about. I've never regretted anything. I don't ever look back and go, what might have been. Yeah. Possibly that one a bit, because I'm passionate about athletics, and all the athletes I ever met were the most incredible people. Yeah. Anyway, so I wish them all well, but my future lay elsewhere.
So that opened the doors, I guess, to green signals further down the line.
Yeah, I mean, throughout all this period, I've done a few other bits and bobs. I've got a health business that I'm. If I say I'm actively involved in, I mean, I was more actively involved with it than I am now. We've got a wonderful management team who run it, and I think they're just very happy when, don't get in the way and mess things up. I only own a small part of that. I've got some fantastic business partners. That's in the preventative health space, so trying to catch disease before you're even aware you've got something, right? Because if you can get it early, you can do a lot more. So that kind of has kept me busy as well. But yeah, a couple of 2.5 years ago, Nigel Harris, who I've kept in touch with from the days when I was at the SRA on Virgin actually, and he was at Rail. I don't know quite how it happened. We were just chatting one day and went, a podcast. That'd be quite an interesting thing. And it is, because I looked at the railway space and I couldn't see anybody doing what we're now doing. I mean, lots of fantastic podcasts, right, with people chatting about all sorts of madness of things. But what I was really interested in, and Nigel was interested in, was sort of almost like current affairs, the economics, the policy, the personalities running the railway chain, all that kind of stuff. And we just thought, oh God, let's give it a go. And I mean, we weren't cavalier about it. We knew it was going to be hard work, probably not quite as much hard work as it's ended up being. But we had no idea what it was going to become or what it was going to be. But we thought we'd give it a crack. And again, ever so glad we have.
Yeah, I've got to say it's my second favourite podcast.
Your second favourite podcast after the Dogcast. Well, that's fine.
Absolutely, yeah.
Entirely, absolutely, entirely.
But it's like how we started, wasn't it? It's like you were talking to me, it's like, I'm doing a podcast. Well, it was a podcast, wasn't it? Yeah. Those people call it the Dogcast. So
it's great. It's fantastic. Yeah.
So yeah, it's just,
you've obviously got a love of dogs as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've.
We had a lovely Labrador. He was a Drake's Head, black Labrador, Drake's Head Labrador. So he was very much from a gun dog breed up in Lancashire, actually. So up on a champion breeder were Drake's Heads, and he was super. I mean, Wiggins was his name.
Wiggins.
Well, we bought him about 2 weeks after Bradley Wiggins had won the Tour de France. I mean, I love watching cycling. It's one of those things which I love watching, even though I'm not very good at doing it. There's many things like that when it comes to sport. But Bradley Wiggins had just won the Tour de France. We thought Wiggins perfect. And yeah, he was just incredible. I mean, just the softest, loveliest dog. Like many Labradors, always. I mean, in later life was certainly in the last year was struggling a bit with his joints. And then we're not absolutely certain what we suspect he had a stroke. And at that point, it was very obvious very quickly this was, he was not going to get over that. And I have to say, the vets who we, near where we live now in Devizes, were just so wonderful. But, it was the right thing to say goodbye. So he made it to 13, and
that's a good age.
And it is a good age, and he wouldn't have told me because he had no real weight on him. He was mainly because my wife used to take him for long walks every day, or he took her for long walks. I'm not sure which it was. She's not entirely clear either. So he was very lean and active and fit, and you could tell he obviously got the grey hair under the chin, but other than that, he was amazing condition really. But yeah, so he's no longer with us. But for my kids who can't really, my daughter who can't really remember life without him, so that's a bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's like my brother had a black lab. Right. They are lovely. I mean, you got your chocolate ones, and you got your the other colour, the goldy sort of colour ones. But it was just like, I wasn't too sure of black labs, but then basically he brought him round to see us. They just driven from Wales with him, and they called him Alfie. He's a little puppy. First thing he did was wee on me. Yeah, he's going to be a great mate.
He's going to be fine. Yeah, no, it's just a sign of affection, really.
And he every time when he was growing up, he then came in, wanted his little biscuit from me, and I come down, sit on the floor, and he come over and lean on me, and he got the nickname Eileen.
Eileen, that's brilliant. No, well, actually, Wiggins was a real leaner as well, but yeah.
Yeah, my wife walks miles, and Yoshi sometimes just sits down and says, "I've had enough now. I've only got little legs. I can't do it."
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's just asleep.
Good. Great British Railways.
Yes.
Do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing?
Oh no, I think it's a good thing in principle. I think whatever your views around the privatised model, and I'm a lot more supportive of good things that came out of the privatised model than many. I don't think any model's perfect, and I don't think the GBR one will be either, right? But I think things do come in waves and cycles, and I think we've got to the point where some will call it friction, some will call it, over complex interfaces. Got to the point where something more straightforward probably needed to be done, and so I'm not one of those people who believes that it's a nationalisation versus privatisation thing, really. I think fundamentally it's about people, and it's about structure, and it's about empowerment. And I am worried about this model, that this government's approach is too political. It's too much about whether it's public, it's nationalised or not. And I just don't think that's the most important thing. I think it probably enables a few things to happen that might otherwise not have been able to happen. So for that, it's an enabler rather than an end in itself, where they seem to be a bit more convinced it's better because it's nationalised. I'm not convinced by that. But as I've been doing green signals, I mean, it's clear that the number of talented people around the railway industry is still as many as ever before. We've got some extraordinary people. And I think if they are genuinely empowered and set clear directions, they will flourish and they'll do amazing things. And I think GBR can probably help that if it's allowed to. So much depends on GBR's ability to establish a clear relationship with government right at the outset. And some will say, well, yeah, it'll take a bit of time to develop and settle down. I'm not sure that's probably true. I think Peter Hendy's very canny. He's got people involved who kind of understand what needs to be done in terms of those relationships. You know, people like Andrew Haynes and Richard George now at Network Rail, Jeremy Westlake also at Network Rail, and some very smart people in the operating world. So I think we've got some very good people. I'm cautiously optimistic, but it won't just happen because it's been nationalised. It will take all these people, an enormous amount of hard work to make the model work.
Yeah, and I guess we want to avoid the HS2 kind of.
Why? Go it.
Yeah. What are your views of HS2?
I think people do get very confused between whether something's a good idea in principle and then how it's been implemented. Right? It's had some massive issues with implementation, not least of which the way that the contracts were set up and the way that it was the risk. I think the risk allocation was done at a point where the design was not fully settled, right? And there's a lot to learn from that. I think they are doing some amazing stuff, by the way. I mean, on the ground, I've been to quite a few of the construction sites, and I'm always blown away by the quality of the work, the people, the scale. It is an extraordinary thing. And like all these things, it's kind of settled down now into very effective delivery in many ways. But just because we've had issues with implementation hasn't stopped it being a good idea, you know. And it was a really good idea. There is no other project that could have delivered the transformational release of capacity on the existing network in many, many places, west and east coast actually, if we'd built the eastern leg, than HS2. And a lot of people say, oh, well, just think if we'd spent all that money on the existing network. Well, yeah, but you still wouldn't have got anything like the boosting capacity that you would have had if we'd done HS2. So
it's like we're going to widen this motorway, we're going to keep widening it. And what you're going to do, you get more traffic and more traffic and more traffic, and they're just all still built up again.
Yeah, but if you look at something like Transpennine route upgrade, which I went and had a look at recently, are very impressive. I mean, the managing director of that, James Richardson, is running a really collaborative enterprise, he calls it, and it's very collaborative. It's actually quite hard to tell who is Northern, Transpennine Express, Network Rail, contractor, whatever. It's impressive to see. That is thick end of £12 billion. And in capacity terms, one extra fast path an hour, one extra semi-fast path an hour, and 15 extra freight paths a day. Right? Now, I'm not knocking it. That's great stuff to have. But you think what HS2 could have delivered, right? I mean, think about what would have gone on to HS2. 3 Manchester Londons every hour, 3 Birmingham to Londons every hour, 2 Liverpools, a Glasgow, possibly 2 Glasgows, and a Preston. All of that would have gone off the existing West Coast main line and onto HS2, leaving all of that space. I mean, we're now into sort of like double-digit paths freed up, right? So that's why I sort of look at HS2 and go, oh, you know.
It's that point where they go, why are you saying we're doing this, and then, oh no, we're going to cut it back because of budget constraints, and it's...
Yeah, I suppose I do have some sympathy, amazingly, with the government. I can see why they've gone, blimmin' heck, you know, that is a lot of money. I mean, an awful lot of the if you ever want to look at a project in difficulty, I always start with a client. So I think the Department of Transport and the Treasury have an awful lot of, you know, sort of looking in the mirror themselves to do.
Do you think it was over-engineered?
Possibly, but I remember having a conversation with SNCF about this very question. I mean, long before really HS2 came about as an idea, because it was actually the SRA. We got Atkins to do a study on high-speed railways, and they ended up coming up with a Y network that's remarkably similar to what we have now. And I remember the guys at SNCF doing it. Whatever you do, build it as fast as you possibly can, and build it with as much capacity as you can, because, you know, when you look at Paris-Lyon, we wish we kind of had more capacity than we do. So I can kind of see the logic for wanting to have a very fast, very high capacity railway. In terms of its alignment you could have stuck it anywhere, and whoever it went near would have complained.
Yeah.
So I am not convinced about some of the tunnelling. Yeah, that's not necessarily because of alignment. That's because people didn't want to see a railway. Same thing applies, really. And quite a lot of the other stuff that's been so prevalent in the press, like bat sheds and all the rest of it, an awful lot that's nothing to do with HS2. That is complying with other legislation and regulations that exist. So, well, with the benefit of hindsight, yes, probably is more, it goes at a faster speed than we arguably really need. But I don't actually necessarily blame the original architects of it for wanting to do that, because they were future-proofing it. Yeah. And so many things now we wish we'd future-proofed, and maybe they went a bit far. I'm not convinced it's led to the tens of billions that everybody suggests. I think that's for other reasons.
Yeah. Are you happy on the outside looking in rather than being stuck in there as chief exec or something in these projects?
Absolutely. I think the lovely thing about having a podcast is you can have an opinion on everything and be accountable for nothing. I mean, it's just absolutely, that's now down to other people. I mean, it's so lovely being able to interview as we do, sort of senior leaders in the industry, and then at the end of it go, anyway, good luck. Off you go. Instead of that being you. But no, look, I there are days when I go, oh, I would do this. Yeah. But then you realise, but I had my time, and like I say, the people you come across, whether it's, people like Steve White or Lawrence Bowman, the guys who are now running integrated railways, or some of the leaders in Network Rail, Nick Millington. I've met Marcus Jones, and even I met Jeremy Westlake for the first time the other day. I mean, you kind of go, oh, actually, we're in quite good hands here. We've got some seriously good people. So I don't feel, I know what I would do, but I don't think I'd do any better a job. So I think once you realise that, you can move on.
I was watching the podcast on beaching.
Yeah.
It was the 60th anniversary?
63rd.
63rd.
Yeah, and we thought that was good because it was the 63rd anniversary of something that was done in 63. That was our justification for it, really. Yeah.
There's a few people that just like they look at it, they think it was wrong, we lost this, we lost that. But out of that, there was a lot of decent sort of kind of things that we now take for granted. Like, I think one of the things you mentioned was the Freightliner was formed.
Yeah.
And also like the block trains that, it used to be your little...
Your loose couple,
sort of
train,
local freight.
Wagon load freight.
That's it, yeah. And I think there's far more that outweighs the good of what happened, I think, with the Beecham report than obviously the bad stuff, in a way.
I mean, British Rail had been closing lines long before Beecham came along. I mean, you look at what actually was closed pre-Beecham, and the answer is an awful lot, right? I think the thing that was dramatic about the Beecham report, it was so much all at one go, and it was perceived as being, rather than a drip, 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 it was like, let's just do a big, big change. But the railways hadn't exactly filled themselves with glory over the 55 modernisation plan. One of the things we tried to do when we were talking about it last week was say, yeah, but don't forget, think about the economic reality of Britain in the early 60s. Because when you see it in a post-war, post-austerity context, the motor industry was absolutely one of the leading lights of getting Britain back on its feet post-war. So it was a real golden child, right? And yeah, I mean, Marples was clearly conflicted. He was clearly, a dodgy character, as we discovered when he disappeared off to France on a VAT thing or whatever it was. But actually, Tom Fraser and Barbara Castle could have stopped quite a lot of it and chose not to, right, for a variety of reasons. I think the thing that surprised me about the whole conversation around Beeching, quite a lot of people heard that show and reacted to it and said, well, I think that somebody actually said, the thing I can never forgive him for, as if that, I mean, that's just a weird thing anyway to say, but the thing I can never forgive him for was not just mothballing the lines, because it's now so difficult to reopen them. We should have mothballed them. I've really struggled to get my head around that. So you sat there in 1963 and you're going to go, I'm going to close this line because I see no future whatsoever for this service or this line. But I won't sell off the land or develop it because you never know in 50 or 60 years, the thing that I believe has no future might have a future. I mean, and the problem is I think people look at what happened in the 60s through the lens of how frustrated they are with what we can or can't do in 2026. That's kind of understandable, but if you were there in 63, it would have been irrational, really, I think, to somebody else said, oh, you know, look at the French, they've just left them all there. Yeah, but the population density, the land development density in France is totally different to the UK. So I just don't think that comparison stacks up. So no, I would tend to agree with you. I think that lots of things about the Beeching report were clearly not done right. Yeah, and the numbers were not right on many things. But the big macroeconomic stuff that was happening, I think that was an unstoppable force.
Yeah,
Right.
I tend to think he was between a rock and a hard place, really. Something had to be done.
Yeah.
And that was what he came up with.
I think you're probably right.
Yeah.
I think you're probably right. But one thing's for certain, it's brilliant content. People still want to carry on talking about it, so we end up talking about it.
Yeah. I used to work with a guy, and he was always saying, "Oh, he cut the line to Bridport. I'll never forgive him." And I'm just like,
the line to Bridport. I mean, for heaven's sakes. I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, that people forget, I think, about railways are not very good at much, but what they're good at, they are brilliant at. So they're fantastic at high capacity, high frequency, high speed intercity services. They are brilliant at high frequency and high capacity inter and intra-regional services. And they are brilliant at homogeneous train load block freight, if you like. They're also very, very good at high speed connections from cities to airports. Right? Those things railways are superb at, no question about it. Branch lines meandering down to Bridport from Maiden Newton, no, that's not the best thing. I mean, I suspect the branch lines we've got today will survive because it would be so politically difficult to do anything about it, and I'm not suggesting for a second we should, right? But the notion of reopening those kind of things,
yeah, that's just.
I just don't get it. It doesn't make any sense from a transport point of view, from a financial point of view, an economic point of view. Just that one thing's for sure, we've got heritage railways today that we probably wouldn't have had it not been for the Beeching report.
Look at Swanage. Yeah.
So look at Swanage. So yeah, that's a nice thing.
I'm just grateful that, was it the Serpal report 10 years or 12 years later or whatever?
A little bit later, it was 81, 82, wasn't it? Something like that.
Really cut the...
Well, interesting with Serpal, did he not have 5 options? One of which, but one of them definitely was, I mean, true scorched earth. There was like no East Coast Main Line north of Newcastle, which incidentally, I understand was something the Beeching was quite keen on as well, you know. But no, the Serpal report, you looked at the map for that particular option, you went, wow, you know, there's just kind of nothing.
I think that's the only option I've seen then, clearly.
I'm pretty, like you think, am I misremembering that? I've seemed to remember there were multiple options, but of course, everybody always remembers the one that would have had the most dramatic effect. But I think it's right that Sir Peter Parker, who was chairman at the time, either he or Bob Reed, whoever was the CEO, they found errors in it, in the report. And of course, the second is like everything is, you can find an error in something. Yeah. Well, if that's wrong, clearly the whole thing is wrong, you know, and able to rubbish it from a political point of view. But yeah, those would have been dark. And that Serpal, that would have been an error.
Yeah.
In my view, that would have been, because it was taking the railway away from the things it's actually very good at doing. Beeching was different. Beeching, by and large, was all about not doing the things that it wasn't that good at doing, where there were potentially better alternatives. And I think that's why the two are quite different.
Yeah, fantastic. Looking forward to this week's Green Signals and
thank you.
Further weeks, obviously. Richard, thank you so much for
Pleasure.
Spending the time with us today.
Thank you.
I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
This episode of the Railway Dogcast was recorded at STEAM, Museum of the Great Western Railway, Swindon in April 2026.
If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe.